Oh, I have the. All right. Thanks, Alex. Now I put you in a different presentation mode.
Oh, it's not in the regular.
No. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and start talking again. So yeah, I mentioned this a little bit earlier today, before everybody was on, but we had a Salvage Lumber Summit back in 2023, and are circling back around to see what the latest updates are here. Quite a bit's changed. So I'm gonna spend a couple of minutes running through some slides to overview where things are at now. And then we have some speakers lined up. Um, Felix from Cornell, Nick from Urban Jacks, Ian from Tallwood, and then Eric and Frank. Eric's with Urban Machine, and Frank's with All Bay Mill and Lumber. There's quite a few cool, interesting advances that we want you guys to know about. And then we'll have time for questions. So we're not doing questions after each speaker. We're just going to do them at the end. Um, and if there are questions that come up and you put them in the chat, it's possible that the speaker might address them before we get to the question section. So that's a possibility too. Or sometimes Alex and I will jump in and answer questions. Then we're going to break into some small group discussions, and then probably come back together for a larger problem solving discussion, and then close things down officially at 10:30, and then have our informal discussion, so to speak, from 10:30 to 11. So that's where we're at. Let's go ahead and keep going. So the ultimate goal is regional circular economies for salvaged lumber. So this is kind of a big picture for the world, I guess. That's what we've been looking at and thinking about. But because we are in King County, and going at the next button, Alex, because we're part of the Replus program, um, we're focused. Alex and I and our team are focused on King County and the Seattle area for the most part, and the Pacific Northwest. And we're kind of working on developing something that we hope will be promulgated elsewhere. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Alex. So the goal of today really is to increase the likelihood of a high quality salvage lumber warehouse proposal. So City of Seattle, in case you haven't heard, is going to be issuing a contract for about $4 million for setting up a salvage lumber warehouse in Seattle. It's due February 11th. We want to make sure as many people as possible know about it, and as many connections as possible can come together to work cooperatively. Um, Couldn't go to the next slide. So one of the things driving this really is the hierarchy of wood uses. You can see down in red at the bottom, most of the wood in our area currently is going to landfill and to industrial boiler hog fuel. We really want to see that material going to its highest and best use, which is whole wood reuse. Some of that is happening already. There's um, some market issues, I guess, with widespread reuse of whole wood. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we're really spending more of our energy looking at ways to get wood finger jointed and made into studs or lamb stock, and then into mass timber assemblies. We'll talk about that a little bit more too. So what's the opportunity? If you're trying to keep material out of the landfill, like we are in the King County Solid Waste Division, there's about 61,600 tons of clean wood that's ending up in landfill. We'd like to get that out of there and go into higher and better uses. Um, if you're trying to figure out like where the material could go, we'd had some research done, and most of that clean wood that's going through the system is suitable for use in new building products once it's been processed. If you're looking at climate impacts overall in Seattle and King County, there's about 350,000 tons of clean wood that's going through the system every year. That works out to about 1.01 million metric tons of carbon dioxide that would be eliminated through reuse. Because almost all of that material right now is being either burned as fuel or landfill. If you're looking at social cost of carbon, it's about 94, $95 million in value. If you're looking at the value of the wood, um, depending on how you price it and what the use is, somewhere around $70 million. Um, and then there's a lot of jobs that could be created through transitioning to a circular economy for salvage lumber. Go to the next slide, Alex. Real briefly, here's a not great slide, but it shows the circular economy for salvage lumber. If you start at the top right, you've got building deconstruction. Then the basic lumber is pulled out of it, and or the lumber is pulled out of the buildings, and you do minimal processing initially. And the wood would go to a salvage lumber warehouse. It could be finger jointed, then it'd be manufactured, um, and then distributed and go back into construction. Brad, I'll get back to you later on the methodologies for the carbon calculations. Um, and I can make that available to anybody who's interested. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is a lot of the wood that we're getting through our transfer stations that's being collected in different places. We're working on doing a lot of promotion of deconstruction, incentivizing deconstruction, which is going to end up in larger pieces of wood being harvested and available. But at the moment, a lot of what we're looking at looks like this. And go ahead and go to the next slide or hit the button. One of the things that I can go to is finger jointed. There's some processes that are using stuff as short as 6 inches. We've been looking more in the 13 to 18-inch range. Go and hit the next button. Once it's finger jointed, it can go into engineered wood products, mass timber assemblies, dowel laminated timber, etc. Going to go to the next slide. So a few of the building blocks that have gotten us to where we are. Clean wood is banned from disposal in King County and City of Seattle. We now have Washington State Building Code that allows for salvage lumber to be used without grade stamps. It's used at a lower grade. Washington Building Code now encourages salvage assessments and deconstruction. There's language that permitting jurisdictions can adopt. There's a local deconstruction training program that King County has been doing. We're going to be doing the third round of that in March, probably, of this year. Seattle has deconstruction incentives in place. EPA grants have rolled out and are now in place for starting in 2025 for development of LCAs and EPDs, life cycle assessments, and environmental product declarations. And there's a groundswell of similar efforts elsewhere. We won't go into a whole lot about that today, but there's a lot going on. So one of the big things that's happening is King County was awarded a grant from the EPA to work on decarbonization, and about 3.4 million of that is directly tagged for working on the circular economy for salvage lumber. Part of that is to hire a circular economy for salvage lumber senior project manager. We're going to be doing interviews next week. There's money in there to develop grant programs to support these efforts, and then also to develop sub-programs that support workforce development, product testing, and supporting manufacturers, primarily through grants for developing supporting manufacturers of materials. And then there's also funding in there to work with development of environmental product declarations for new building products. Next slide. City of Seattle got a solid waste infrastructure grant from the EPA for $4 million. The City of Seattle currently has requests for proposals out on the street. So it's going to be a 3-year contract for about $4 million. And they're looking for somebody to collect process grade inventory and coordinate distribution of salvaged lumber, primarily recovered from residential structures, but it doesn't have to be. And the city is expecting some outcomes. One is just to accelerate the development and adoption of lumber reuse or a circular economy for lumber. And the second one really is to contract with a firm that is committed to the city's women and minority-owned business enterprise program and submission of an inclusion plan. Proposals are due February 11th by 1 p.m. So again, that's a big driver of why we're here today. Can go to the next slide. So, circular economy business park for salvaged lumber. This is a bigger concept that we want to just make sure is on the table for today. The salvaged lumber warehouse basically is working to get the lumber from um, the point that it's harvested to the point where it could be used for something else. But if we can get co-location of a lot of these other businesses that are interested in utilizing wood or providing salvage lumber, the synergy will go a long way. So you can see here in green would be a potential initial setup for the salvage lumber warehouse. Basically, if you follow that green arrow, they're just getting in lumber, and then some of it's going directly out to contractors who are going to be reusing it whole, and the smaller pieces initially might just get chipped and go to Hogfield because that's where the market is now. But once the salvage lumber warehouse is up and running, hopefully it can move to the next stage, which would be the yellow squares, making finger jointed material and getting into mass timber or some other engineered wood product. So that's kind of the vision we've been working with. Next slide. And this basically is just talking about, if you have a number of these businesses and they end up kind of not being able to be located together, like the picture on the left, they're going to be spread out. It's not going to be a lot of efficiencies. But if we can create a campus where they can be co-located, there's going to be a lot of efficiencies in terms of shared warehouse space, shared equipment. One company might not necessarily have to have, or everyone's not going to have a forklift, for instance, right? This is a small example. We'll get to your question later, Brad, on FSC. Go to the next slide, Alex. Yeah, that's it, basically. So that's a quick overview. If most of you, I think, have been following this process for quite a while, and our search for property and our efforts to try to pull all this together. But I wanted to overview this for everybody else. And yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our speakers. Who do we have up first,
Great. So
Alex?
first, we're going to have Felix Heisel from Cornell's Circular Construction Lab. Felix, if you, I've stopped sharing, so you can share your screen.
Okay. Thank you all for joining. It's fantastic to see all of you. Happy New Year. And it's great to see what's happening in King County. We're always envious from New York, looking at many different and interesting and super successful strategies that come out of this area. I have 5 minutes, so I'll fly through some of the work that is currently going on at the Circular Construction Lab, which is my research unit at Cornell University. And there's a sort of interdisciplinary unit that brings together mostly architecture students, but students from several other fields as well, systems engineering, lots of biologists, mycologists, and then industry partners. Some of them are on the call. Dan Bergsago, for example, from Schleich Bergermann Partner is also here today. The reason why I was invited, and Kinley already mentioned it, is this EPA call that is out. We're currently a selectee. Hopefully, we're turning into an awardee within the next 2 weeks. Is our proposal to work on salvage product passports, sort of an EPD plus for salvaged lumber, a collaboration with Urban Machine, Finlex Reuse, Build Reuse, and Arup. Diane from Finlex Reuse is also on the call. Eric, of course, will present later. So it's great to be part of this family here. What this call is, or what our project proposal is trying to do is essentially addressing full work packages. And the key driver of this is the realization that salvaged lumber for structural reuse is hitting several barriers, and some of them have to do with procurement questions. So the limit, the fact that there is no EPD attached to this timber product restricts it from, for example, any project that has federal funding. And other scenarios where an EPD is simply a procurement requirement. So that's one key issue why this seems to be important. And then, of course, by tackling it in combination with a material passporting idea, and that's sort of our combination in the salvage product passport. The data that this document would provide also addresses material specifications, essentially a kind of product catalog, so that structural engineering, design values, and all of the questions that architects and engineers need to use this material in new construction or in renovation projects would be integrated into this data set. And so the work packages go through this in terms of a question of how can we automate the generation of these data sets? How can we use that data set to then better inform the way we harvest these materials? Can we then understand um, the single building and the product data to come up with a better way to look at city scale, urban scale, material flows, to redefine our understanding of the urban mine. And what kind of methodological questions do we embed in this conversation in terms of EPDs, PCRs, and the framework that we're sitting in within this industry. And I'm going to use the next couple slides to simply show where we are at. Some of this work has started. Some of this is work from previous projects, kind of following the same scenario of these four scales. So something that many of you have seen probably before is we're doing our own deconstruction projects just simply to understand and learn the limits and barriers of the harvesting of the materials and then somehow bringing them back into structural applications. For that, we're building case studies that are small, but that in this case, for example, the circulating matters installation that required a full building permit. And so it asks us to go through the steps of the permitting and the structural engineering with these products and trigger the discovery of barriers in that process. And so when we look at the results of this research, one paper that just recently came out kind of addresses the question, which design values do we even need to know about timber, about salvaged timber, so that we can use it in structural timber applications? How do we define these values and how do we generate these values? Other questions are what are fasteners that are applicable for reuse? And how can we discover structural engineering uh, processes to reuse, for example, a screw, right? So the tests that you see on the right side here are rescrew tests where we basically just took a salvaged lumber connection, used the screw, then took the screw out, put the screw back in, and kind of tested what actually happens and how can we develop that into towards a code or a codification of this understanding. On the left side, you see tests that are happening about the interface of different layers of salvage timber towards a better understanding for many of the products that Kinley just laid out in his hierarchy of wood reuse. And our idea is kind of the question: can we do this without adhesives. So are there ways to combine salvage timber into structural products without the addition of formaldehyde containing and emitting glues? And then we're working on sort of detection of problems. This has to do with the need for a visual regrading towards these EPDs and SPPs. And so these are first tests that are happening right now of the detection of holes, of cracks, and a kind of towards an automated process for regrading. On the larger scales, we're working with LiDAR technologies to detect material quantities in buildings to inform deconstruction processes, and then scaling out using these archetypes towards a better understanding of the urban mind. What you see here is a kind of digital twin that we generated of Ithaca, New York, and the materials that are contained in the built environment, in the existing built environment, in based on where they are and what kind of materials they are and when they were built, when these buildings were built. And then last, kind of the question, what are the frameworks and methodologies that we're addressing? We just recently published a white paper that is free for download on our website about, this is of course very specific to New York, but maybe some of these ideas are applicable to other locations, kind of trying to understand the economic importance of salvage, deconstruction, and material reuse, and what kind of policy recommendations we can put forward to change that system. And so this white paper puts out 19 policy recommendations along the 5 chapters of building the workforce, building the market, building the infrastructure, leading by example from a state perspective, and supporting long-term circularity. And if this is something that's interesting to you, please feel free to download that document and ask us questions. This is an ongoing process, and we're really keen in that conversation. And I'll leave it at that. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Felix. And just to remind everyone, we're going to have time for questions after everyone's had a chance to speak. But thanks for going ahead and putting your questions in the chat for now. And next we have Nick Nobel of Urban Jacks. Take it away, Nick.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Nick Nobel. Let me just put this on a bigger screen so you can perhaps see it better. I hope that shows up okay on your side.
Looks good.
All right, thanks. So I'm general manager for Urban Jacks, a Vancouver-based startup company that has been in an R&D and prototyping phase for a little time. We've now opened a facility in Vancouver, quite centrally downtown, in fact, and we had a grand opening at the end of November, where we're in the process of ramping up our production on the finger jointing equipment. So we are, we have just a few minutes to share, but basically, I decided to capture it in 1 or 2 slides here just for everybody's information. So we do wood waste management, by which we mean basically material handling. So we receive a lot of material from whether it's deconstruction of houses or offcuts from building projects, as well, primarily right now from the film and TV industry, where we do a lot of the denailing and sorting and things like that manually. And from which then we produce a finger jointed lumber for dimensional lumber, so studs like 1x4s and 2x4s and that sort of thing as well. And we work a lot with then other partners in an ecosystem. And as we all know, let's say a circular economy is at its best and as its strongest in an environment with connecting circles together, if you like. So we can't just act in an alone sort of model. So we definitely encourage this conversation. We're happy to be a part of this conversation as well, because that's the way that this sort of paradigm shift will take place and move forward. So very, very simply, we encourage the diversion of the wood waste from the landfill, much in line with your project. We record everything, so we do a lot of data capture on the inbound material, and that gives us all the diversion data that we can pass on to our customers. And it does show, quite a lot of what we've been able to do over the last little period of time. Roughly 86,000 kilos of CO2 has been diverted in a relatively short period of time since we ramped up in Vancouver. And that's been really a testament to a lot of manual labor and a lot of splinters and blood, sweat, and tears. But we're on a good path forward right now. We use some rather high-end equipment to do the finger joining process itself. And we won't go too much into detail into that. And obviously, then we're also a supplier of that lumber as well. We encourage very much the idea of the more you recycle, the better deal you get on the product price at the end of the day. And we do then, let's say in our business model, so, inbound material, the lumber sales, like I said, right now, we are quite big at the film and TV industry, especially in Vancouver, as we start to grow into other industry segments, notably then construction. And as we want to expand into other markets, and Seattle being quite close to us and close to home, it feels like an interesting step and something quite relevant for us to be a part of. We do a lot of data reporting, and that's one of the core activities that we do, because it is really with data that you can only prove that you're improving the status quo. And then finger jointing basically as a service as well. And I'll leave it there because I know we have a short agenda for this, and I'm happy to answer any other questions afterwards. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Next up, we have Ian McDonald from Tallwood Design Institute.
Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. We'll just get this presentation going here in a second. Okay, is that visible to everybody?
Yes.
Great. Well, Alex asked me to say a few words about the work that we're doing down in Oregon. Tallwood Design Institute has been around for almost 10 years now, and we're established by the state of Oregon to really kind of support expansion of structural wood use where it was appropriate to do so. Also kind of supporting expansion of the manufacturing supply chain in Oregon, given the state's historic dependence on the forest products industry. And so we do this work through applied research, applied education, and outreach. And we've been really, it's working across the disciplines of forestry, wood science, structural engineering, and architecture. And the two universities involved mostly in the partnership are, Oregon State University, where I'm based, and the University of Oregon, which is an hour down the road in Eugene. We have, many faculty working through our network in these different departments and schools, and we've done around 100 projects, and really a lot of focus on the mass timber space for us, just because of the that being the new shiny object in structural wood products. This is a shot of one of half of our lab, which is kind of our home base, the Emerson Wood Products Lab in Corvallis, Oregon. This is the fabrication bay. And then, this is the structural testing bay that you see in this photograph. So it's a strong floor and strong wall that allows us to do seismic type tests of large wood structures. In this example, we put together a the structure of a three-story mass timber building. And the reason I highlight this project is that we, after this thing was finished, we had about a year or so of tests on this with different seismic systems. We wanted to look at ways to reuse the materials in the project, and kind of take the opportunity to use that as a focus of some research on, what are the parameters required? What are the decisions you have to think through in order to reuse that material? Because these mass timber members would have to be structurally recertified for use as structural elements, we chose to work towards a non-structural application. In this case, this being Highland Hall in Portland, which is the Department of Architecture's new home in Portland. And the dividers and conference room pods that you see in the interior of this space were what was fabricated through this kind of reuse process. We use this large CNC that we have in our lab to remanufacture mass ply panels into the dividers and the conference pods there. And you can see some of the work happening and some of the work nearing completion there. We did an LCA of this, looked at, what is the environmental impact of this compared to using, gypsum partitions, and that information is available. We also had another PhD student go through using that as a case study for looking at, decisions and around deconstruction and reuse of mass timber buildings. And then this is going back a little bit further to 2017. This was a student, Rafael Arbelas, who did some work taking, salvaged lumber and then doing testing to evaluate its applicability for use in mass timber. And then we actually created some panels in our lab scale press and tested them. And basically the takeaway from this was that, yes, it's often very high quality material. 96% of samples were sufficiently stiff to meet minimum requirements for the E3 grade CLT panels. The problem really was the immaturity of the supply chain, meaning that the material itself ended up being about 3 times as expensive to source as using virgin fiber, which is probably not a surprise to this audience. We have a industry consortium based at OSU, 20 companies in the mass timber space actively collaborating on applied research and development that's common interest to all. And underway right now is another study to look at reuse of glue elements. There's not too many results to report from that yet, but if anyone is interested in following that work, I'd be happy to loop you in. And then Alex asked me just to touch on the fact that we're not restricted purely to Oregon. So our 2 universities have been working since 2020, roughly, with other entities in Oregon around this mass timber coalition. We are working on various kind of economic development focused projects to grow the mass timber industry broadly in Oregon, and we're working off about a $40 million Department of Commerce Build Back Better Regional Challenge Award that came to us in 2022. And the catalyst for us getting together were these devastating wildfires that happened around Labor Day of 2020. Building on that, in 2023, we partnered into Washington State, and so we now have a very active collaboration and a designation as an EDA tech hub. That's the Economic Development Administration's place-based investment program funded by the CHIPS and Science Act. And so I just wanted to signal that we have, I think, 86 entities across the 2 states that have signed on to this tech hub. And we're currently updating market studies and looking at various activities together. But the overall goal of that is to take the early leadership of Washington and Oregon in the mass timber space. So nationally, we're the early adopters and leaders. Within 10 years, the aspiration is to become global leaders or a globally competitive region of manufacturing in that area. So I just wanted to signal that we are open to collaboration across the region. And some of the public organizations are shown on this slide, but there are many more private companies and others. As I said, more than 80 in total. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ian. And for our last presentation, we have Eric Law of Urban Machine and Frank of All Bay Mill and Lumber. I'll let you all take it away and introduce yourselves.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alex. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Law with Urban Machine, and I've got Frank with All Bay Mill and Lumber with me as well. So update from last year is what I'm going to provide, and then Frank's going to talk with you about some of the milling operations and stuff that he's been doing with the reclaimed lumber. We are the guys building the robots to remove the nails, screws, staples, the metal from the lumber, so we can take lumber from a singular stream to a circular stream. This is our core focus here at Urban Machine, and enable people to recycle and reclaim more of it than currently turn it into hog fuel. Quick update for you guys on our machine. So we released a new version last spring of our machine. So it's currently operating at All Bay Mill and Lumber in American Canyon is where it is. So we're taking in full-time lumber from contractors, waste facilities, newer lumber, older lumber, all different ages. We've had some different species come through our facility now, some older growth oak, and we're cleaning it full-time here at the operation to prove the technology. The machine has 3 steps now. The first step is cutting all the metal fasteners flush with the wood. The second step is cooking them all, so then we can extract them much easier, reduces the friction force, and this is a huge enabler for the screws. And then the third step is using the picker here to pull them out. And so the goal is to get lumber metal free at a price competitive with virgin lumber. Right now, we're selling wood for 80 cents to about $1.50 a board foot, depending on the dimensions. So we're almost there compared to virgin lumber FSC certified wood. We are FSC certified for chain of custody for our material that we process, and getting it clean for you guys. So we've made a lot of great progress, and we're currently in negotiations to lease and rent our first machines to other operators. And so if you're interested, reach out on that. In the meantime, in addition to the machine, we've also been turning wood into products. One of the big challenges is we have a massive amount of material. We're doing solid sawn lumber and glulam that's running through our facility. But what do you do with all that material? So one of the tests we did is we sent a truckload up to Brightwood in Madras, Oregon, to get it finger jointed. And it's come back to us, and now we're selling finger jointed 24-foot long 2x4s and 2x6s through our facility and in partnership with All Bay Mill and Lumber. So we took a lot of the 6 and 7 footers that we end up with from the waste stream, and we turned it into 24-foot boards. And so we're targeting contractors with this material for things like temp structures. It's got a cool appearance to it. You can see the staggered pattern there on the right. The other product that we're building in partnership with All Bay Mill and Lumber is DLT. So we spun up a DLT machine there at All Bay, and so we're creating DLT wall and ceiling panels. And then we're also doing glulam blocks as well. So as you know, Ian mentioned, there's not a whole lot of uses for glulam right now on the structural side. And so we found some avenues to turn them into demising walls and partition walls in office buildings, using a block that can come into an existing office space. So it's a lot less mess, a lot less cost than drywall and steel studs, and you get the beauty of wood without having to put panels on top of drywall and steel stud. A little bit more information on the DLT here. The awesome part about DLT is the only time it has glue is if it's in finger joints on that one. And then I'll turn it over to Frank to chat a little bit more about his operations there at All Bay and some of the DLT.
Hello, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate Eric's introduction. I have been very blessed to have him in our company's past, and I like the collaboration that we've done the last few years. The DLT machine that we have spun up has produced quite a few test samples, and we're working through the kinks on the manufacturing for large scale. Been very excited to sell to our customers the reclaimed lumber that Eric's machine has been able to do. We've produced some beautiful interior applications for stair treads, wall paneling, and actually architecturally surface roof structures. So in addition to my involvement with Eric and through an introduction with Eric, we've also been doing some urban forest salvage, where tree companies are bringing in logs and we're processing them here and selling them into the same chains, architectural uses, not structural uses just yet, due to the inability so far for our industry to grade this stuff as structural use. So I've been very blessed to have been working with Eric, and he will be taking All Bay into the next chapter of our future. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank. And this is Frank's mill. This is an example of what's, under the covers in this reclaimed lumber that we're processing. So he took these 4x12s, ran them through his planer, and you can see the beautiful wood that's on the inside. And so this is coming out of buildings here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then we denail it, remove the metal fasteners so it can run through the planers without damaging the blades there. So it's really cool to see it in action and running these days. Some more pictures of the DLT and Frank's machine there that he's got running at All Bay. Some of the different patterns, you can do acoustical DLT. We can actually put some insulation in there to improve the acoustic values of the solid wood. We've got some projects that we're looking at doing this for actually up in Oregon. And then a little bit more on the glue lamp blocks there for you guys as well. So one of the big things for us is really driving demand. That's really the big challenge in the reclaimed lumber industry is how do you get people away from specifying, one piece of wood for a fireplace mantle to saying, hey, we want to use it in engineered products. We want to use it in buildings. We want to use it in walls. So we can drive the volume. We've got to get the volume up for it. So we're really doing a lot of education with architects, contractors, where they can use it, how they can use it. It can be regraded, but it does require an extra step and a certificate. And so we're spending some time with structural engineers as well to get this material back because there is no shortage of raw material. The volume of material out there is massive. So, thank you, Alex. We'll turn it back over to you guys.
Great. Thank you, Eric and Frank. And that concludes our wonderful presentations from all these interesting folks who are doing all kinds of great stuff around the country, and we're hoping to get more of that happening here in the Seattle area. Kinley, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, well, we actually had a little space in the agenda for answering a couple of questions. So I'm going to run through just a couple real quick that we saw showing up in the chat. One was about from Brad about the calculation methods. We're going to have to dig those out and get those out later. I don't have them immediately on hand. Another question was about FSC certification. The thought that I have had personally is that the Salvaged Lumber Warehouse and the Circular Economy Business Park or Salvaged Lumber Business Park should be FSC certified, keeping the supply chain. Ryan touched on that a little bit. I saw in the chat. I don't know, Ryan, do you want to just unmute and talk briefly about the transfer credit system?
Yeah, thanks. So sure, the FSC wood could be recycled, but if we're going to be integrating virgin FSC wood to have sort of a broader spectrum of product available in there, or non-FSC, the transfer credit system just allows those FSC credits to essentially be moved back and forth between products, eliminating the need for segregation of the product. And then you're selling an FSC mixed credit product out the door, which is what most of the market is anyway. And it would just simplify the management of the yard should y'all choose to go that route.
Okay, cool. Thanks. And then there was a question from Valerie. Are you looking at design values to replace different dimensions at specified grades with larger dimensions with assumed grades? Valerie, was this a question for Urban Jacks?
I think so. Second presenter.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they were like working on a lot of design values and sort of like an EPD plus.
Yep. You want to respond to that?
Sorry, I was on mute. I beg your pardon for that. So can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So, are you looking at design values to replace different dimensions at specified grades with larger dimensions with assumed grades?
Wow. Not sure I know how to answer that question right off the top of my head like that. For now, no, because we're still sort of figuring out how our equipment kind of works. But we are sort of also limited a little bit by the capability and the capacity of the equipment that we have in place right now. So we know that the equipment is capable of doing at specific or different types of dimensions on width and height and length. But let's see, swapping an ungraded 4x. For now, no. We're not at that stage quite yet.
Okay, thanks. And then there was also a question about if there are any extended producer responsibility requirements for construction materials in BC. Any of our speakers want to answer that one?
Extended producer responsibility is one of the areas of policy and governance and really market conditions that is just beginning to be understood. Now, it's nice that it was raised here today because when we formed the company, we took standards from Europe. And originally, when we met with Sweden and Finland and Northern and Germany to look at the EPR, they're focusing now on the food and beverage space. So a lot of learning is to be done as the number one component of landfill, the food and beverage is studied. What we've learned is that just as here, the only areas that produce any revenues and real money is in the e-waste and the metals. And so we need to now look at how to first quantify the amount of material that's being diverted, and then be able to go back to industry and policy and hold them accountable. So let's call it a 10-year cycle before I think it's as well understood in North America as well as we've seen the evolution abroad. Does that answer the question? Because it's the best answer I've got, and I hope it does.
Hey, it's a good answer. There's still more work to be done. All right. So I think we hit most of the main questions that we saw popping up. If there's more or any we didn't answer, go ahead and put them in the chat again. And we'll have another round later if we need to. Alex, you want to go ahead and go to the next slide? I think we had a slide for this part. Or no, am I just supposed to talk?
Was someone else going to speak, or are we?
Yeah. One other thing that I was going to mention, I guess, was just that King County has developed a circular economy for salvage lumber webpage. Recently went live, and it has a lot of great resources on it. It probably doesn't have all the calculations, Brad, that you're looking for and that others would like to see on the greenhouse gas stuff. We'll work on making those available there. But it is a great resource. When we get a chance, we'll put that in the chat so you guys all have access to that. I also wanted to introduce you to Terry Sullivan, who is with the King County Executive's Climate Office. Just to give a kind of a real quick overview I've given of the circular economy for salvage lumber project that we've got going on. Now, Terry, go ahead.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Terry Sullivan. I work in King County's Executive Climate Office as our Buildings and Energy Manager. Kinley laid out the basics in the intro on the climate benefits of repurposing salvage lumber and our new grant that we received from the EPA, but I'll just reiterate a few notes there. As many of you know, historically, our climate programming in buildings has been focused, on operational carbon pretty exclusively and hasn't taken full life cycle perspective, and sort of recognizing that and that a salvage lumber warehouse itself doesn't, jumpstart the market, although it's an important and necessary first step. We worked closely with Kinley and the bigger solid waste team to work with the City of Seattle and regional partners to include some market development funding in our bigger EPA grant application. So we luckily received that $50 million for building decarbonization work. 3.4 million of that is for this circular economy investments. That will include grants to support distribution sites, clean wood processing, manufacturer grants, product testing, some workforce development and training efforts all over the next 5 years. As Kinley mentioned, we are hiring now and hope to have someone on board by the end of February to lead that work and build out the program. We'll learn more about what that looks like over the course of 2025, so a lot more to come on that as that takes shape. We'll be figuring out how to make the best use of this funding to make thoughtful investments to make this a self-sustaining market. But more to come as we develop the program over the next year, but look forward to working with many of you on that as we kind of grow our work in this space.
All right. Thanks, Terry. Alex, you want to go ahead and take us into the small group discussions?
Yeah, so the next part, just as a reminder, the agenda for today is to for the next 30 or so minutes have several breakout rooms and group discussions and get people talking about what they're doing or what part of the ecosystem for salvage lumber they're in and what connections people can be making. Um, so I'm gonna put everybody in breakout rooms for 10 minutes. Um, and the agenda was supposed to end at 10:30, but we are going to keep it open till 11, so that we got to make sure there's plenty of time. And again, put questions in the chat, but we're going to put you in rooms now to be able to ask questions and talk about the things you all are doing with each other. So
Sorry, Alex, just to jump in and give a little bit more structure. It'd be good in this first round anyhow to introduce yourself, your company, your organization, kind of what sector you're in, and kind of like your vision for a circular economy for salvage lumber, and start the discussion with the people in your group, I guess, too, about what the next steps are, what needs to happen next. Let's leave it at that.
okay, here we go.